Welcome to the In Shape Fitness Show. I'm Coach Kim, and today's podcast is about foundations. And by that, what I mean is establishing a foundation to ready your body and your life for an active lifestyle, for exercise regimens and more recreation, for a less sedentary existence before you actually start to do some of that work. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because it's the end of January. We're getting close to the end of January in 2020 here. The beginning of the year is the time when people do set resolutions and try to set new goals, look at life in a slightly different way. All really, really laudable kind of approach to the beginning of the new year. In this case, the beginning of a new decade. Really cool. And I support that. I think it's a really great thing to do. However, what we also know, the data that we have about the way that resolutions are composed and then lived, is that by this point in January, in fact, I think it's the 19th that experts say, which is crazy. Most resolutions are already on a back burner, and then they just basically kind of blow away slowly but surely as we head into the deepest part of the winter and then the spring. So we're constantly, as a culture, at least in the United States, most adults in the United States are constantly trying to reestablish that behavioral pattern and setting the goals and making the changes, doing the work of improving our health so that we can enjoy our lives more, so that we feel better, so that we look better, so that we can wear what clothes we want, so that we can attract the people that we want to be in relationships with, so that we can have more fun, so that we can do things like run for charities or whatever. There are so many different reasons to just to compete, to feel good about yourself. There's so many reasons to move. There's so many reasons to stay still. I mean, for I think a ton of people, we stay still in our lives because we kind of have to, because we have to work, because we have to do a job, and that job is, in more cases than not, a sedentary job. We just have fewer manual labor types of jobs. And the manual labor we've been looking down on for so many decades now. We look down on lawn tending. We look down on house cleaning. We look down on childcare in many ways because of this sort of attitude that we have as Americans that, we should just be able to pay for things to happen. If we succeed, it's because we're able to get things off of our plate because we're too busy in our big world, making money and doing our big jobs. And we're most of the time then sitting at office desks and attending to things like emails and meetings and things that keep you in a chair all day long. So the reason that we're not motivated, it really is driven by mostly that, by the need to work, the need to be productive, and we don't see physical health as part of productivity anymore. The second reason, and this is important too, which is why I wanted to do this foundational, sort of like establishing a foundation before you really do exercise podcast, is because there are a lot of injuries, not necessarily doctor-oriented injuries as in, breaks and strains or sprains or really significant structural problems, but there are nagging issues that we have as we get older, and those tend to fester more once you start moving. I mean, it's like clockwork, because when the personal training and sort of gym businesses get really, really busy in January and then start to, lose that spike by February. The physical therapists and the injury treatment sort of types of facilities, they start to spike just after that. Like there's a shift. And that's because if you start off January thinking, oh, this is the year that I'm going to run a marathon and I'm going to go out and I'm going to join this group and I'm going to go from 0 to running 10, 12, 15 miles a week without the substantive foundational work before that, you're going to end up with plantar fasciitis, with knee pain, with hip pain, with back pain, with all kinds of other issues that may relate to reverting back to that sedentary life that maybe you're more used to, and thus you've maybe given up. So those two big reasons, again, one is that we no longer view physical functional health capabilities as part of our productivity culture. Our productivity culture is in the office, at a chair, at a desk, doing, sending emails, sitting in meetings. For most people, we think of it that way. Or we're injured, we are physically incapable of sustaining an exercise regimen. That's the second reason. So we've got these two big barriers to putting together, to creating a plan that makes sense for everyone, regardless of your age or your gender or your capability level, your starting point. You've got to start where you are. Be really sure about what you're capable of doing, and sometimes that means starting really slow, starting out like a tortoise, and really thinking about the way that the kinetic chain works, the way that you drive energy to different movements that you want to be able to perform in order to exercise efficiently and effectively. And it involves, taking that extra amount of time perhaps to condition some of the support structures that are built inside of the body. The body is this amazing piece of science and art because it has a lot of strength and a lot of vulnerability. And then, to kind of pass the Rubicon to this sort of functional place where you could do what you want to do is, I think, ultimately the goal for everyone, to have a life and enjoy it. And I'm telling you, here I am in Harlem. I live in Harlem, Manhattan, and New York City, and the sirens. Not that the sirens aren't everywhere in Manhattan or New York City, but this is why you might hear sirens in the background while I'm doing my podcast. So I'm not in a fancy studio. I work in my business out of my apartment, and here we have big time sirens outside of my apartment right now. In any case, so that's really what we're all looking for, right? We all want to be able to live, to enjoy, to be happy, to do the things that we want to do and feel good about ourselves. And so if you look at exercise from that perspective, exercise in a sweaty gym is really unattractive and not a motivating factor for a lot of people, and is one of the main hindrances to this sort of component, this notion that the only way to do this is to go hard on yourself, to get into a gym and really kind of beat your body up in order to lose the weight, to develop the muscle, to, do whatever it is that you want to do. I'm here to tell you that's not the case. And that's why foundations are so important. And that, and then to say this as well, the foundation that you need is probably not the same foundation that I need or the same foundation that somebody else needs. Foundations are different. And it really does depend on what kind of activity level you would like to sustain in your life. Are you reaching your older ages and just hoping to be able to go for sustained long walks on a variation of terrain, maybe play with your grandkids, go on vacations and be able to sightsee and enjoy cultures and locations from, in different places around the country or world? Are you sort of just looking to be able to, live quietly at that sort of second or third gear from where you are right now at your base point? Or are you potentially looking for something a little more, oomph, a little higher in that gear shift, maybe at the third gear or fourth gear, where I was talking to a woman just yesterday who was a tennis player. And so we're talking about her. This is the first time I've ever met her. We're talking about how she's in her 80s. She's in her 80s, and she is not unfit completely, has issues, and is not an exerciser. So she's sedentary. She wants to move around. She is motivated. But kind of like down about exercise, something that I see a lot. Something actually I feel a lot, and I'm not in my 80s, I'm in my 50s. So I totally relate to this issue. My mother, who's in her late 70s, is like this as well. There's this kind of like dread about, this is what I have to do in order to do X, right? I have to do X in order to do Y. I have to do Y in order to be X. Is not appealing to many people. But then she started talking about how much she loved that she used to play tennis. You know, longingly thinking back, and I could see the brightness in her eyes start to sparkle, in fact, her eyes, when she referred to this game, to this activity that she used to love and has no longer been actively involved in it because it's now, too difficult for her, too painful for her. So there's that middle level of maybe wanting to do something that you think maybe is beyond your scope because of your age or your ability level, some injuries that you've developed. And then there's like sort of that next like highest gear of like really intensive folks that maybe bucket list a marathon. And I see tons and tons of people like this every year as well. The marathon training that I do is with adults that won a guaranteed number for the TCS New York City Marathon every year in November. And I am one of the coaches of this group called Team for Kids. And we raise money. I coach adults that run. They join this program and they start running to prepare for a marathon. And I get to coach them for that part. But then they're also raising money for youth running programs that are put on by the Roadrunners Club in New York City. And this is really great because if you are also a parent, which I am, my kid benefits from these programs. They're public elementary schools and middle schools and high schools in New York City. They don't really have gym the way we had gym when I was a kid. They don't really have the attention to health and fitness in the way that I think is appropriate for the sustainability of our population in this country. It sucks. It's a big time problem. But that's not why I'm talking about this today. So we've got these like 3 layers. I'm going to go away from that, and I'll get back to business of exercise here. The foundation components. We could maybe think about the way that we have the 3 little pigs building their houses. Like, are we building a foundation for leisure and light recreation? Are you building a foundation for moderate activity and maybe a little bit of recreational sport? Or are you building a foundation for something more intensive, something competitive maybe, or something hard on the body, strenuous on the body? So those 3 foundational questions need to be considered. They have to be considered by anyone starting an exercise program, anyone hoping to kind of maybe change the way that they look at their own health, at their own functionality, at their own physical capabilities, and then, of course, about their own, about the weight and all the other things that go along with exercise, because you want to have a foundation before you sit down and start bench pressing 100 pounds or 200 pounds or whatever, or running 10 miles a week, or hitting the yoga class that you believe is going to be the next big thing, or the spin class, or whatever it is. Starting an exercise program before you have had this conversation with yourself and sort of set aside the time to create the foundation is really dangerous, especially as you get older. And there are real, like practical susceptibility questions that should be considered, that will come up when you start. I already have some people that are training for the New York City Half Marathon, which is in March, that are talking about little hip injuries, little issues, little pings and twings and annoyances that they begin to feel as they kick off a training program and develop a little fatigue. And then one of the most important things that tends to happen has to do with the left and the right in terms of locomotion, just in terms of moving around. the left and the right sides of the body having different levels of strength. And not that you're going to ever necessarily perfectly align your left leg with your right leg. If there is a really big difference between the strength of your left leg and the strength of your right leg, the flexibility of your left leg versus the flexibility of your right leg, and you start an exercise program and you get into the deep, the depths of it, you're not paying attention to this issue, you're going to start to develop little overuse issues, little overuse injuries that can get bigger and more compromising of your goals in the end. So let's talk about these foundations a little bit. This isn't a long podcast today. I'm going to do a little bit about this sort of very baseline components here, and then I'm going to pick up on this for the next podcast next week as well. So the very base, and this is so important. There are two really important things. One is being realistic about where you're starting, like knowing where you are, assessing where you are starting right now and what you can do right now is so important. Something people don't always do. Okay, what should you be able to do is certainly another element that has a lot of different answers, another question that has a lot of different answers, because again, it depends on what you're wanting to do. You might not need to be able to hold a plank for a minute if your goal is to, enjoy your life in a leisurely way and be able to go on trips, to be able maybe to go for a walk and enjoy your family. Maybe a plank for a minute isn't so necessary for that. But if you want to run a marathon and for a lot of other activities, having the strength of your core to be able to hold your body up, because when you can hold your body up on the floor in that flat horizontal position with the pressure of gravity bearing down on you and all that isometric contraction, that sort of collective isometric contraction taking place inside of your trunk, is really important in terms of the kinetic chain, in terms of the way that energy is distributed from the center of your body heading outward to your arms and your legs and your head. So knowing where you are starting, meeting yourself, having your brain meet your body where you are right now is so important. Think about it. Now, it could be thought about in many different ways. You could write it out. You could bring someone in to talk about it. I'll be happy to talk about it with you myself. If you have questions, you know that I give my advice out freely. If you go to bodybynshape.com, I'm happy to help you. But thinking about what it is you're able to do right now in terms of the way that your body stabilizes on your feet, whether you experience pain when you lift up out of a chair or get up off of the floor, whether you can stand on each of your legs independently for some period of time. Again, it depends on what it is you're looking to do, but if there is a big difference between the stability of your right leg and the stability of your left leg, that's another element in terms of strength and flexibility that is really important. So if you could, for example, stand on your right leg for 15 seconds without falling over, wavering, I guess, if you will. Never try this, by the way, if you're not standing next to a wall and holding on to something. But if you could stand on your right leg for 15 seconds and you're pretty good, but then you try it with your left leg, and within 5 seconds you're like bobbing around like a weeble wobble, you've got really significant imbalance issues. And so in terms of the two sides of your body. So those are the kinds of questions that you want to ask yourself. Can you touch your toes? Not necessarily all that important, but can you sit up straight with your back straight and bend forward on the floor with your legs not bending a little bit? If your legs tend to bend, your knees tend to bend when you are flat, then that means that you probably have some flexibility issues with the back of your legs, which probably means that you're going to have some issues in terms of your ability to sustain locomotion, mobility over time. So again, knowing where you are, how you begin is really, really important. The second thing and the last thing I'm going to cover today is the habit forming. Because more than anything else, creating a habitual routine for stimulating movement is something that has to be done every day. And that means it takes about a month for it to really set in. A month. It's not something you can just do one day or a couple of days and then make an assumption that you've got it. You're on it. Because guess what? In another month, if you're just doing something a couple days a week, you're going to forget. You're going to get busy, something's going to happen, and then it's not going to be a habit anymore. The habit is so important. The habit doesn't have to mean that you have a workout every morning. You don't have to go to the gym every day. Whatever crazy people created this concept. And I will tell you, since I am a cynic about big government and big companies, that we have all been jilted over the years by these concepts that we need certain things, that we need to buy certain things. We need to, trust in the speak of these like powerful behemoths. The workout, sort of concept of having to go to a gym or to do a workout is something that was embedded in my brain when I think by the time I got to college, this had hit me. I was not a physically active kid, all that physically active kid when I was younger. We were not athletic, right? I was active and I was never overweight, but I was not an athlete in school. I was a model United Nations student council, shy academic kid, and I just didn't compete in pretty much anything. I tried cheerleading for one season, and I just wasn't on the in crowd, so it was just not cool for me. You don't have to believe everything that the commercials tell you to believe, that the ads tell you to believe. By the time, though, that I got to college, it had been embedded in my head that I needed a membership to a gym and I needed to go as often as I needed. And for some years, for me, that meant going 5 days a week. And other times I think I went much, much less. But again, that's the habit that we have, that's the culture that we've kind of gotten comfortable with, that we've accepted over time, that we should be doing this. And if we're not, something is wrong with us. If we're not a member of a gym, if we're not going to the right spin class, if we're not going to the yoga class, if we're not working with a personal trainer. So habit formation doesn't involve any of those things. What I mean by habit formation is by waking up, or before you go to bed, but definitely better waking up and activating the body every single day for a period of time, somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. I have to say, some days when I'm really tired, I narrow it down. Like, I've got 5 things I do at minimum. At minimum, I do 5 minutes of work, and on the really busy, when I'm super tired mornings, if I've been out late the night before for some crazy reason. So habit formation means creating a space for yourself to wake up your brain with your alarm clock, or however else you wake up. Maybe you're a small child, and then not skipping the physical part of the wake up. Part of waking up is making sure the body is turned on. And you cannot do that by getting out of your bed, getting into the shower, and drinking a cup of coffee. It doesn't happen. All right? So here's the deal. We're coming up on 25 minutes. I have a crazy busy day. I have to move on to my next client. However, I want to leave you with this. I talked a lot about the way that the 2 main things today that you really want to be mindful of before you begin the regimen that will be suited to your life, right? So we talked about a foundation for light, leisurely recreation, enjoyment of life, maybe sort of on more of a, I don't even want to put ages, attach anything to it other than to say what it is you want is light recreation, enjoyment with your family, maybe going on walks. That's a sort of the what was it? The sticks, right? I said something about the three little pigs earlier. I can't remember. It's the sticks and the oh goodness, I'm gonna have to look this up. And then the stone is the intensive foundation. That maybe it's the straw and the sticks and the stone or bricks. So this is the straw, like kind of the lighter foundation that you can be thinking about in terms of how you begin. And then there's the middle, more intensive, slightly more intensive, maybe slightly more intensive activities associated with a middle level foundation. And then there's the stronger, the really, much more intensive foundation that you might need for some activities like training for a marathon, if that's on your bucket list, or maybe traveling around the world in a sailboat or something like that. So those are like talking about what it is you want, and then developing the habit that you will need in order to begin is where we were today. When I come back next week and talk about this subject again, I'll reiterate what we did today, plus talk about the exercises in those foundations and the habit-forming exercises that can proliferate to the exercises within those foundations as well. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. I will talk to you again soon.